The mafia boss refused the maid one day off. Then she put his mother's rosary on the table. Chapter 1. At 8:17 on Monday morning, Nora Quinn asked the most feared man on Bell Street for one day off. Matteo Carbone did not look up from the seating chart spread across the breakfast table. No. His uncle Salvatore laughed into his coffee. The memorial luncheon is tomorrow, girl. Staff do not choose family days. Nora had expected the refusal, although the laughter still landed like a hand against her cheek. She untied her white apron, folded it once, and placed an old silver rosary beside Matteo's black-gloved hand. The room went silent as Matteo finally raised his eyes. His mother had worn those beads every day for 15 years. "Where is she?" he asked. "Upstairs, putting on the blue coat you told everyone to donate." Nora held his stare. "She gave me the rosary because none of you would let her finish a sentence." Four men in dark suits shifted around the long walnut table. 2 were blood relatives, 1 was a family attorney, and the 4th had spent 20 years arranging other people's silence. None of them spoke now. Matteo Carbone controlled the freight routes that entered South Bell, the restaurants that stayed open after midnight, and the quiet agreements that kept worse men from treating the neighborhood like prey. His name could empty a room, stop a truck, or make a city inspector remember an appointment elsewhere. Yet a 35-year-old maid had just placed his mother's rosary between his leather glove and his untouched espresso. "Explain," he said. "Ask her." Salvatore's chair scraped back. "Mind your tone." Nora turned toward him, calm enough to make the older man's anger look childish. "I have minded my tone for 11 months. It did not help Mrs. Carbone get heard." "Nora." Matteo's voice was low. She looked at him again. His face was hard, handsome, and controlled, with black hair brushed away from a brow that rarely showed surprise. A heavy signet ring pressed against his glove. Beyond the tall windows, 2 bodyguards waited beside a black SUV while rain polished the old brick courtyard. "You asked for a day off," he said. "Why?" "Your mother wants to spend tomorrow at St. Agnes." "Tomorrow is my father's memorial luncheon." "Exactly." Salvatore made an impatient sound. "Lucia is the guest of honor. 200 people expect to see her. 200 people expect to see her sit beneath a photograph while men tell stories she has already heard." Nora faced Matteo, not his uncle. "She wants to serve lunch in the parish kitchen where your father worked every Tuesday before anyone called this family important." Matteo's gaze moved to the rosary. One silver link near the cross had opened slightly, and a single bead hung crooked against the table. "My mother agreed to the luncheon." "Your mother said, if Matteo needs me, I will endure it." "That is not agreement." The attorney closed his folder. "Miss Quinn, you are overstepping your employment." "Then fire me after she gets her answer." Matteo rose, and everyone else became still. He was tall enough that his shadow crossed the table before he did. He removed one glove with deliberate care, lifted the rosary, and ran his thumb over the worn silver cross. For one moment, the feared mafia boss looked less like a man deciding someone else's fate and more like a son who had discovered an empty place in his own house. "Bring my mother down," he said. "She is not evidence," Nora replied. "You can go upstairs." Salvatore stared at her as though she had thrown the coffee pot. Matteo's eyes narrowed, but his anger did not rise. Something more unsettling replaced it: attention. "Come with me," he said. "Is that an order?" "It is a request." Nora took a slow breath. "Then yes." They left the breakfast room together. Behind them, Salvatore muttered that the household had forgotten its structure. Matteo stopped in the doorway without turning. "The structure," he said, "will survive 10 minutes without you speaking." Nora did not smile until they reached the stairs. Chapter 2. Lucia Carbone stood before her bedroom mirror in a blue wool coat that had been removed from the donation boxes less than an hour earlier. She was 68, silver-haired, straight-backed, and entirely capable of deciding which coat belonged to her. Her left hand rested on the carved head of a walking stick, although she used it for balance rather than helplessness. A small overnight bag sat near the bed, packed with an apron, sensible shoes, and 3 containers of almond cookies. "There," Lucia said when Matteo entered. "Now perhaps someone will believe I am leaving." Matteo looked at the bag, then at Nora. "You packed this?" "Your mother did. I checked that she had her medication list and warm socks." "I do not need permission to pack socks," Lucia said. "No, Mama. Do not mama me in the voice you use when you are preparing to move a meeting." Nora moved to Lucia's side, not in front of her. That small choice did not escape Matteo. During the past year, doctors, relatives, and household staff had often stepped into his mother's path before she asked for help. Nora waited until Lucia touched her arm. He has the rosary, Nora said. Lucia's expression softened. Good. It has listened to me longer than any man in this family. Matteo closed the bedroom door. Why did you give it to her? Because she asked me what I wanted, and because you kept asking everyone else what I could manage. His jaw tightened. I asked Dr. Vale whether the kitchen would exhaust you. He has not watched me dice onions since you were 10. You nearly fell in March. I tripped over Salvatore's ridiculous new rug. The rug was removed, and I survived. Nora lowered her eyes, hiding the edge of a smile. Matteo noticed. You find this amusing? Only the part where the rug lost. Lucia laughed, and the sound altered the room. Matteo had heard his mother laugh at formal dinners, where every reaction arrived at the correct moment, but this laugh was smaller and warmer. He could not remember when he had last caused it. Tomorrow is for Papa, he said. Yes, which is why I will spend it where he spent his Tuesdays. The luncheon raises money for the Carbone Foundation. The parish kitchen feeds people before your foundation approves the press release. The rebuke landed cleanly. Nora busied herself adjusting the handle of Lucia's bag, giving mother and son the privacy of not being watched too closely. Matteo crossed to the window. Below, Bell Street carried on beneath the rain. Delivery vans stopped at family restaurants. Men in black coats spoke beneath awnings. At the curb, his bodyguards scanned passing cars while pretending not to look at the windows. He had built his life around presents. He attended every council, every funeral, every negotiation, and every family event because absence left a chair for somebody else to claim. 14 years earlier, he had spent one weekend away while his father tried to settle a dispute alone. By the time Matteo returned, Enzo Carbone had suffered a fatal heart attack in the back room of the old social club. Since then, Matteo had never taken a day off. He had not realized he had turned that discipline into a rule for everyone near him. Why does Nora need leave? He asked. I can send a driver and security. Lucia gave him a disappointed look. Because I asked Nora to come with me. Why her? Because she knows when I need an arm and when I need room. Because she does not answer questions directed at me. Because she remembers that your father liked too much pepper in the soup. Nora glanced toward Matteo. I also know the freight elevator at St. Agnes is out, the rear entrance has 3 steps, and the kitchen needs 2 extra volunteers after noon. You called them? Last week. Before your leave was approved. Your mother had already decided. Matteo turned from the window. You planned to take her regardless. I planned to ask properly. When that failed, I planned to resign properly. There was no tremor in her voice, although losing the position would cost her the apartment above the carriage house and the salary that covered her younger brother's trade school fees. Matteo knew both facts because he knew the background of everyone who entered his home. He had mistaken information for understanding. You would leave your job over this? I would leave a job that required me to help people silence an older woman. Lucia reached for Nora's hand. You see why I chose her. Matteo saw more than he wanted to admit. Nora wore a simple gray dress beneath her apron, and a loose strand of chestnut hair had escaped its knot. She did not resemble the polished women Salvatore seated beside him at dinners. She looked tired, stubborn, and completely alive. He opened his hand. The rosary lay across his palm. Your request is approved, he said. Nora did not reach for the beads. That is not the question anymore. What is the question? Whether your mother has your approval. Lucia's fingers tightened around the walking stick. Matteo looked at her. For several seconds, the practiced answers lined up in his mind. He could approve the trip with security. He could move the luncheon. He could send staff and keep the family schedule intact. Each solution still made him the owner of her choice. You do not need my approval, he said at last. Lucia's eyes shone, although she did not cry. Better. I would like to come. To St. Agnes? If you want me there. She studied him long enough to make every powerful man downstairs feel irrelevant. You may peel potatoes, she said. Nora laughed before she could stop herself. Matteo looked at her. Something else is amusing? I am imagining Salvatore's face. So am I. This time, Matteo almost smiled. Chapter 3. The breakfast room had become less confident by the time they returned. Salvatore stood at the head of the table as though occupying Matteo's empty place might make it his. Beside him, family attorney Vincent Doro had reopened the luncheon folder, while Carmine Russo, a cousin with expensive cuff links and inexpensive patience, whispered to the event planner. Matteo entered first. Nora walked beside Lucia, but she kept half a pace behind until Lucia chose a chair. The distinction was subtle, and Matteo now saw it everywhere. The luncheon will proceed without my mother, he said. Salvatore blinked. That is impossible. It became possible when she declined. Lucia, surely you understand the message this sends. Lucia folded her blue coat over the chair. It sends the message that I have plans. Carmine pushed away from the sideboard. The donors are coming to honor Uncle Enzo. Then they can honor him without using his widow as decoration, Nora said. Salvatore's face reddened. Nobody asked the maid. Matteo set the rosary on the table again. She asked for 1 day off, he said. You laughed. It was an absurd time to ask. She was the only person in this house carrying out my mother's wishes. That made it an excellent time to listen. The men around the table exchanged glances. Matteo had spoken softly, which was always worse than when he raised his voice. Vincent adjusted his glasses. We can restructure the program. Mrs. Carbone could appear for 30 minutes, then proceed to the parish. No, Lucia said. Vincent looked at Matteo. Matteo did not rescue him. My mother answered you. Lucia's mouth curved with satisfaction. Nora moved toward the coffee service, acting from habit, but Matteo caught the flicker of pain when she flexed her right hand. The rosary's open link had nicked her finger earlier, leaving a thin red line near her thumb. Sit, he said. Her shoulders stiffened. I have work. You have approved leave. Tomorrow. Then let me rephrase. He glanced at the event planner. Miss Vale can pour the coffee, she ordered. The planner nearly dropped her tablet. Nora looked from Matteo to the empty chair beside Lucia. Are you asking me to sit at the family table? I am asking you to explain the St. Agnes schedule. I can explain while standing. Why? The question stopped her. For 11 months, Nora had learned the invisible lines of the Carbone house. Family sat. Staff stood. Family spoke early. Staff spoke when summoned. Matteo had not invented every line, but his silence had kept them polished. Because that is how this room works, she said. Not today. Salvatore exhaled through his nose. Matteo. Uncle, if the sight of a working woman in a chair threatens your authority, you never had much. Nora sat. It should have felt like a victory, yet the attention around the table was sharp enough to cut. She did not shrink from it. She opened her small notebook and explained the parish plan, including arrival time, kitchen duties, medication breaks, and the route that avoided the broken freight elevator. As she spoke, Matteo watched the room stop seeing an apron. Nora knew how many soup pots St. Agnes owned, which volunteers could lift them, where Lucia could rest without being isolated, and how the kitchen handled food allergies. She had called the parish nurse, checked the weather, and arranged for an accessible sedan rather than Matteo's tall armored SUV. Your security vehicle is difficult for Mrs. Carbone to enter, she said. Mr. Bell can follow us in it, but we will use the gray sedan. One of Matteo's bodyguards, standing near the door, nodded. She is right, boss. Of course she is, Lucia said. Matteo turned a page in Nora's notebook. Her handwriting was neat but forceful, with boxes around every task that depended on another person. At the bottom she had written, "Ask Lucia, not Matteo." He touched the line. You wrote this for yourself? For anyone tempted to forget. Including me. Especially you. Carmine gave a disbelieving laugh. You let staff speak to you this way now? Matteo looked up. Only the useful ones. Nora's eyes flashed. I am not useful because I challenge you. No? I challenge you because I am useful, and because being useful does not require obedience to a bad decision. Lucia reached for her coffee. Marry that sentence, Matteo. It would improve the bloodline. The event planner choked. Color rose beneath Nora's cheekbones. Matteo remained still, but something warm and dangerous shifted behind his ribs. Mama, he said. I am old, not dead. Nora focused on the schedule with heroic concentration. Matteo took back the luncheon folder. Move the foundation event to Thursday. Remove my mother from the program and from every advertisement. Tomorrow, the house staff receives paid leave afternoon. All of them? Salvatore demanded. All of them. Because one maid embarrassed us at breakfast? Matteo placed both hands on the table. Because one woman showed me that this house had confused service with surrender. Nobody laughed again. Chapter 4. By Tuesday morning, rain had washed Bell Street clean without making it gentle. Nora arrived at the main entrance at 7, wearing a navy coat over a cream sweater and dark trousers. Without her gray dress and white apron, she looked less like part of the house and more like someone who might walk away from it. Matteo noticed from the second-floor window. He had dressed himself in a black three-piece suit, but he had left the tie on his bed. The absence bothered him until he understood why. For 14 years, every important day had required armor, and every piece of clothing had been selected to remind the world that he controlled the terms. Today belonged to his mother. He chose a black shirt with an open collar and pulled on his long overcoat. When he reached the courtyard, Nora was helping Lucia into the gray sedan. She offered her forearm, waited for Lucia's grip, and let the older woman set the pace. Belle and Santos, Mateo's bodyguards, stood beside the black SUV behind them. Nora looked at Mateo's open collar. "You survived without a tie. The morning is young. Mr. Bell has an emergency one in the SUV." Belle stared ahead. "I told you that in confidence. You keep it in a clear bag." Lucia settled into the back seat. "Are we going to church or discussing men's accessories until noon?" Mateo opened the other rear door. "I will ride with you." Nora paused. "Your SUV can follow." That was the plan. "You changed a plan voluntarily? Do not make me regret it." "That sounds almost like a joke." "Do not make me regret that either." She smiled as she moved around the car, and Mateo found himself watching the expression longer than necessary. St. Agnes occupied a red brick corner between a laundromat and an auto repair shop. The church itself had narrow stained glass windows, but the parish kitchen was below street level, reached through a side entrance beside stacked delivery crates. Steam clouded the basement windows, and the smell of onions met them before the priest did. Father Daniel opened the door in a flour-dusted black shirt. "Lucia Carbone. I was told you had become too grand for us." "I was told the same thing." He kissed her cheek, greeted Nora by name, and then noticed Mateo. "Mr. Carbone." "Father. Do your hands still work?" Mateo glanced at Nora. She held out a sack of potatoes. "We are about to find out." The parish kitchen did not care that Mateo's name could close streets. It needed 6 crates unpacked, 4 stockpots cleaned, and 300 potatoes peeled before 11. Lucia tied on her old blue apron and took command of the soup seasoning. Nora gave Mateo a peeler. "I own restaurants," he said. "Then you understand food starts before the dining room. I employ people who peel potatoes. Today they have paid leave." He looked at her, then at the potato. "You planned that answer." "Since breakfast." Mateo removed his signet ring and placed it in his inside pocket. He rolled his sleeves, took the peeler, and began. His first potato lost enough flesh to feed a small child. Nora leaned over his shoulder. "Are you punishing it?" It resisted. "Hold it like this." Her hands closed lightly over his. The kitchen continued around them, full of clattering pans and ordinary conversation, yet Mateo became aware of the warmth of her palm and the clean scent of soap in her hair. She adjusted his grip. "Shorter strokes. Let the tool do the work." "You say that as if it applies elsewhere." "Most useful advice does." When she stepped away, his hand felt unexpectedly cold. For the next hour, Mateo peeled potatoes while Belle and Santos carried crates under the delighted supervision of 3 retired women. No one asked for a favor. No one lowered their voice when he passed. One elderly volunteer told him his slices were uneven, and Nora made no effort to defend him. Mateo found the experience more honest than most family councils. Shortly before 10, Lucia reached for the rosary that usually rested beneath her collar. Her fingers stopped against empty wool. "I know," Nora said. "We will fix it after the first pot is on." Mateo looked up. "Fix what?" "The link beside the cross." "You can repair silver?" "Small links and clasps. My grandmother broke jewelry faster than she admitted." Lucia sprinkled pepper into the soup. Nora kept pliers in her handbag through high school. Every girl needs a reputation. Mateo watched Nora carry chopped vegetables toward the stockpot. She moved with assurance, answering questions without taking choices away from anyone. A teenage volunteer asked where to stack bowls, and Nora showed him the system rather than doing it herself. Lucia requested more salt, so Nora brought the shaker and waited while she decided. Competence, Mateo realized, was not the performance of knowing everything. Sometimes it was the discipline of leaving room for another person. At 10:30, Salvatore arrived. He wore a camel coat unsuited to the rain and an expression unsuited to charity. "Mateo, we need to talk." "I am working." Salvatore looked at the peeler in his hand. "That is precisely the problem." Nora set down a tray of bowls. Lucia kept stirring. "The donors are asking questions," Salvatore continued. "Photographers were booked. Carmine says people are beginning to think the family is divided. People should think my mother chose her own memorial. They will think a maid disrupted the Carbone household." Mateo's grip tightened around the potato. Nora stepped forward. I did disrupt it. Stay out of this, Salvatore said. You made me part of it when you laughed at my request. Father Daniel appeared near the stove, but Lucia lifted one hand. She did not need rescue yet. Salvatore turned to his sister-in-law. Lucia, the car is outside. We can still make the noon photographs. No. You are emotional because tomorrow marks 15 years. Today marks 15 years. That is what I meant. Lucia laid down the spoon. No, Salvatore. That is what you forgot. The kitchen quieted while Salvatore's mouth opened, then closed. Nora moved beside Lucia, close enough to support her if asked, but she did not touch her. Matteo saw the restraint and understood it as another form of strength. You heard her, he said. I heard grief talking. Then listen again. Lucia faced Salvatore. I want to stay. Salvatore looked to Matteo, expecting the final authority. Matteo pointed toward the door with the peeler. The gray sedan will take you back. You would humiliate the family for this? No. I would embarrass one man who cannot hear the word no. Salvatore left without another argument. As the door shut, one of the retired volunteers whispered, he forgot his umbrella. Nora reached for the coat rack. Matteo caught her wrist gently. Leave it. He will get wet. Natural consequences. Her laugh escaped before she could contain it. Matteo released her, although his fingers remembered the pulse beneath her skin. Lucia shook pepper into the soup. My husband would have enjoyed today. Papa would have made Salvatore walk home, Matteo said. Your father was dramatic. I have heard that trait can be inherited. Lucia looked between him and Nora. Some traits take longer to appear. Neither of them asked which one she meant. Chapter 5. At noon, the first guests entered the parish hall. They came from the bus depot, the laundromat, the senior apartments, and the construction site 3 blocks east. Some recognized Matteo and looked away. Others stared openly at the black-suited bodyguards carrying bread baskets beneath a painted sign that read St. Agnes Tuesday table. Matteo stayed in the kitchen. Nora organized the serving line, placing Lucia at the soup pot where she could ladle from a seated position. Matteo took the bread station beside her, while Nora moved between tables and the service counter. The work had a rhythm that no family meeting ever achieved. Bowls moved forward. Hands reached. Names were remembered. Nobody needed a speech. An old mechanic named George paused when he recognized Lucia. Mrs. C., I thought you stopped coming. People became too protective. George glanced at Matteo. That sounds expensive. It was exhausting. Matteo handed him bread. Take 2 pieces, George. Are you trying to buy my silence? With day-old rye? Times are hard. Nora covered a smile with her hand. By 1:30, 300 bowls had crossed the counter. Lucia's face was tired but bright, and she accepted Nora's suggestion to rest without being ordered. They moved to a small storage room beside the kitchen, where shelves held canned tomatoes, folded aprons, and boxes of candles. Nora closed the door halfway, leaving it open enough that Lucia could call. Tea, she asked. 5 minutes of quiet, Lucia said. Then tea. Matteo waited until his mother settled into the padded chair. Do you want me to stay? Lucia considered. No. The old answer would have hurt him. Today, he nodded. I will be outside. Nora followed him into the narrow corridor. That was better, she said. I am being graded now? Constantly. By you? By the consequences. He should have been irritated. Instead, he leaned against the wall, sleeves rolled and collar open, and studied the woman who had overturned his house with one request. Why did you really ask for leave, he said. Your mother asked me to come. You could have arranged another staff member. She did not want another staff member. That is still about her. Nora folded her arms. You think there has to be a second reason. I think people rarely risk their home and income for one reason. Her expression changed. The defiance remained, but something more private moved beneath it. My grandmother lived with us, she said. By the time I was 22, everybody spoke around her. Doctors asked me what she ate while she sat between us. Relatives made holiday plans based on what they assumed she could manage. What did she do? She started carrying a wooden spoon. Matteo's brows lifted. Whenever someone answered for her, she hit the table. Effective. Very. She dented 3 tables and 1 doctor's clipboard. I would have liked her. She would have made you nervous. Few people do. She had excellent aim. They smiled at the same time, and the corridor seemed to narrow. Nora looked down first. When Mrs. Carbone gave me the rosary, I remembered how my grandmother used to put her spoon in my hand. It meant she trusted me to make noise when she was tired. My mother was not too tired to speak. No. The rest of you were too practiced at interrupting. Matteo accepted the truth without defending himself. That unsettled Nora more than anger would have. Will you repair it now? He asked. After she rests. Show me. Show you what? How the link works. Nora searched his face. You want a jewelry lesson? I want to understand why it opened. Not everything broken was sabotaged, Matteo. It was the first time she had used his given name. He heard it, and so did she. I know, he said quietly. Show me anyway. Chapter 6. Nora used the corner of a flour sack as a work cloth. She spread it across a small preparation table near the kitchen's rear window, then removed a narrow metal case from her handbag. Inside lay miniature pliers, a flat file, 2 needles, and several silver links wrapped in tissue. Matteo stood opposite her. He had returned his signet ring to his finger, but he had not rolled down his sleeves. You carry those every day? He asked. Not every day. Only when I am near old jewelry, loose cabinet handles, or wealthy houses that believe maintenance happens by prayer. That explains why you came prepared. Your mother's rosary has needed attention for a month. He looked toward the storage room. Why did nobody tell me? She did not want it sent away. Salvatore wanted a jeweler to replace the chain and polish the beads. That sounds reasonable. It would have erased the wear from her fingers. Matteo looked down at the rosary. Each bead was smooth on one side, darker on the other, and the silver cross bore tiny scratches along its edge. My father gave it to her. On their 20th anniversary. You know that? She tells stories while we fold linens. People say more when their hands are busy. Nora lifted the broken link with the pliers. This part has thinned because she turns the cross whenever she is angry. She turns it often. You have a large family. He almost laughed. What do you need me to do? She paused with the tool in her hand. Hold the bead tray. That is all? For now. Matteo took the shallow tin tray and held it beneath her hands. The arrangement would have seemed absurd in his house, where people rushed to take objects from him. Here, the feared man of Bell Street stood under a humming fluorescent light while a maid taught him how not to lose a silver bead. Nora opened the damaged link with precise pressure. Metal remembers force, she said. If you bend it too far, it weakens. If you close it without checking the alignment, it opens again. And if you replace it? Then you decide whether the old link matters more than the strength. What would you decide? It is not mine. Matteo's eyes stayed on her face. That answer again. It is a useful one. Nora selected 2 links from the tissue, one bright and one slightly aged. She set them beside the rosary, then called through the half-open door. Mrs. Carbone, would you like the new silver or the darker link? Lucia answered without hesitation. The darker one. Nora placed the bright link back in the case. Why darker? Matteo asked. Ask her. He gave Nora a patient look that suggested she had begun enjoying herself. Mama, why the darker one? Because I do not want it to look repaired. I want it to look mine. Matteo nodded. The darker one. Nora fitted it into place, but the cross shifted before she could close the link. Matteo moved the tray with her hand, catching the loose bead before it rolled off the cloth. Good, she said. You sound surprised. I expected you to grab. You told me to hold. Most powerful men hear those as the same instruction. Her fingers brushed his while she retrieved the bead. Neither moved immediately. Matteo had touched her wrist in the kitchen, but that had been instinct. This was different. The contact was light enough to refuse and warm enough to notice. Nora, he said. She drew back. Hold the tray level. He obeyed. She closed the new link, checked the alignment, and ran the file across one rough edge. Her concentration softened the stubborn line between her brows. Matteo wanted to touch that place, which was an inconvenient thought in a parish basement. You said your grandmother carried a wooden spoon, he said. Until her hands became too weak. Then she gave it to me. Do you still have it? In a kitchen drawer at my apartment. Why not display it? She used it to stir soup, not decorate a shelf. The answer felt like a rebuke to every photograph planned for his father's memorial. Nora tested the repaired link once more, then placed the rosary in his open palm. It will hold. He closed his fingers around the beads. You made that sound like a promise. It is a repair, not a miracle. I prefer repairs. He turned the cross over, following the scratches his mother's thumb had made through years of prayer, anger, and grief. My father died while I was away, he said. Nora did not fill the silence. I had taken one weekend, he continued. 2 days in Montreal. He told me to go, but when I returned, he was dead. Salvatore had handled the doctors, the club, and every call. So you never left again? Not when my presence might matter. And then nobody near you was allowed to leave either. There was no cruelty in her voice, which made the truth harder to resist. I thought I was protecting the structure. You were protecting the frightened man who came home too late. His expression hardened by instinct. Nora did not apologize. You asked me to show you how the link opened. You think those are connected. Everything opens where it has been bent too many times. Matteo lowered his gaze to the rosary. Men had confessed less to him while facing much greater danger, yet Nora had reached the fact beneath 14 years of discipline with a pair of pliers. What should I have done differently, he asked. Today? For my mother. Do not ask me. He looked toward the storage room. Lucia sat with her eyes closed, hands folded over the head of her walking stick. She appeared peaceful, but not absent. Matteo walked to the doorway and crouched beside her chair. Mama? Her eyes opened. What do you want me to do today? Lucia studied him, perhaps checking whether the question was genuine. Serve the second meal, she said. Send the photographers home if they come. Do not frighten the people who need lunch. Afterward, sit with me for 10 minutes and let me talk about your father without correcting the story. I correct dates. You correct joy. Matteo bowed his head once. I will listen. Lucia touched his cheek. That is all I wanted. When he stood, Nora was closing her tool case. Being present is not the same as listening, she said. I know that now. Knowing at a quiet table is easy. You expect a test. Your family always provides one. As if summoned by the insult, Belle appeared at the end of the corridor. Boss, he said. 3 sedans just pulled up. Carmine brought the luncheon photographer. Matteo looked at Nora. There is your test, she said. Chapter 7. Carmine entered St. Agnes with 12 donors, a photographer, and enough false concern to fill the parish hall. The donors wore expensive coats and uncertain expressions. None had been told that the memorial luncheon was postponed. Carmine had invited them to witness Lucia Carbone returning to her husband's first charitable work, which transformed a private choice into a public performance before the first camera flashed. Nora moved faster than Matteo's security. She crossed the hall, lowered the wooden service screen between the kitchen and dining area, and stepped directly in front of Lucia. No photographs, she said. The photographer lowered his camera halfway. Mr. Russo hired me. Mrs. Carbone did not consent. Carmine spread his hands. Nora, do not make a scene. You brought a camera into a lunch service without asking the guests. The scene came with you. Matteo reached them. Belle and Santos positioned themselves near the doors, their black suits and stillness making the family identity unmistakable. Give me the camera, Matteo said. The photographer went pale. Nora touched Matteo's sleeve. No. Every head turned toward her. He is working, she said. Carmine hired him. Ask him to delete any photographs and leave. Matteo's first instinct was to remove the camera, inspect every image, and let fear prevent future mistakes. Nora's hand remained on his sleeve, not restraining him but reminding him that power could become another kind of interruption. He looked at the photographer. Did you take any pictures? 3, sir. Delete them in front of Mr. Bell, then leave. You will be paid for the day. Relief crossed the man's face. Yes, sir. Bell escorted him aside. Carmine's expression tightened. You are letting staff dictate family policy. No, Matteo said. I am letting my mother decide whether her face belongs in your campaign. This is your father's memorial. Then why is your name on the donor cards? The question struck harder than a shout. Nora saw Carmine glance toward the stack of cream envelopes on the registration table. She had noticed the cards when the group entered, but Matteo had noticed the name. The combination of their attention made Carmine's plan suddenly visible. He had not come to preserve Enzo Carbone's memory. He had come to rescue his own standing after the luncheon changed. Lucia stepped from behind the service screen. Carmine, she said, did you tell these people I invited them? Aunt Lucia, they wanted to honor you. That was not my question. He looked at Matteo. Nora's voice remained calm. She asked you. Carmine swallowed. No. Lucia nodded. Then apologized to them. For the first time, the donors stopped watching Matteo and looked at Lucia. Carmine turned reluctantly. There was a misunderstanding. That is not an apology, Nora said. You are a maid. And you are avoiding 6 simple words. Matteo's mouth almost curved. Carmine saw it and became angrier. I am sorry you were inconvenienced. Lucia lifted one eyebrow while Nora folded her arms. The room waited. I am sorry I misled you, Carmine said at last. One donor, a woman who owned 3 grocery stores on the south side, removed her gloves. Thank you. Now, since we are here, can we help? Father Daniel appeared with a stack of aprons. The dish station is behind you. Within minutes, the expensive coats hung beside the volunteer jackets. Some donors left, but 7 stayed. They carried bowls, wiped tables, and discovered that honoring a dead man required more movement than posing beneath his photograph. Carmine tried to leave, but Matteo stopped him near the stairs. You will wash pots. You cannot be serious. My mother asked for an apology. I am asking for labor. Because Nora told you to? Matteo glanced across the hall. Nora was kneeling beside an elderly guest who had spilled soup, speaking to him quietly while she replaced the wet tray. She did not look toward Matteo, and she did not need to. Because she showed me what you were doing, he said. What I do with that knowledge is my responsibility. Carmine removed his coat. At the dish station, he lasted 17 minutes before the grocery store owner told him he was stacking plates incorrectly. Lucia enjoyed that more than the soup. The second meal ended at 3. Nora made sure the guests who had arrived late received full bowls, while Matteo carried the final stockpot to the sink. His shirt clung between his shoulder blades, and there was flour on one black trouser leg. He had never looked less polished, and Nora had never found him more attractive. The realization arrived without permission. It was not only his face, although the hard lines of it had become difficult to ignore. It was the way he had asked the photographer a question rather than taking the camera, and the way he had let Lucia command the room. Power did not disappear when Matteo listened. It became more precise. He caught Nora watching him. Another grade, he asked. You missed a spot. Where? She stepped closer and brushed flour from his trouser leg. When she straightened, they were standing within the intimate distance usually reserved for arguments or kisses. Matteo's gaze dropped to her mouth. Nora felt the room continue behind them, full of running water and stacked dishes. Not here, she whispered. He met her eyes. That is not a no. It is a boundary. I heard it. He stepped back first, and the choice sent more heat through her than a stolen kiss would have. Chapter 8. The Carbone house felt different when they returned. Nothing visible had changed. The marble foyer still reflected the chandelier, the security men still checked the courtyard, and the walnut table still occupied the breakfast room like a piece of law. Yet Nora entered through the front door beside Lucia rather than carrying bags through the service entrance. Matteo had ordered the change during the drive home, and he had not asked whether Salvatore approved. The older man waited in the breakfast room with Vincent and 2 household supervisors. We need to resolve this before Thursday, Salvatore said. Matteo removed his overcoat. It is resolved. Carmine embarrassed the family. Carmine embarrassed himself. The staff are discussing what happened. Nora handed Lucia's bag to no one. She carried it to a chair and waited. Matteo looked at the supervisors. Good. They should know that paid leave requests will be answered in writing within 3 days. One supervisor blinked. All requests? All requests. We will need coverage schedules. Prepare them with the staff, not for the staff. Salvatore pressed both palms to the table. This house is not a union hall. No. A union hall would already have the policy. Nora lowered her head, but Matteo saw the smile. Vincent slid a document across the table. I drafted a household leave procedure during the afternoon. Salvatore stared at him. The attorney adjusted his glasses. Mr. Carbone asked me from the parish. Matteo read the first page, crossed out 2 lines, and passed it to Nora. Review it. She did not take the document immediately. In what capacity? The person who exposed the problem. That is not a job title. Household Operations Director. The room became silent for the second time in 2 days. Nora looked at him carefully. You are offering me a promotion because I challenged you. I am offering it because you planned my Mother's Day better than my senior staff planned a 200-person luncheon. You understand the house, the employees, and the difference between care and control. Would I report to you? For household operations. And for your mother? Matteo glanced at Lucia, but Nora waited. He understood the test. My mother directs her own care. You would coordinate what she requests. Lucia nodded. Continue. You would have authority to approve routine leave, hire coverage, and stop any event that uses household staff or family members without consent. Salvatore let out a sharp breath. You cannot give a maid that authority. I can give Nora Quinn that authority. The use of her full name changed the offer. He was not rewarding an apron. He was recognizing the woman who had worn it. Nora read the first page. The pay? Vincent named a figure. She did not pretend it was unimportant. It would cover her brother's tuition, allow her to rent an apartment independent of the house, and give her enough room to say no without risking everything. Housing must be separate from employment, she said. If I leave the position, I need 60 days to move. Vincent made a note. Paid leave must apply to kitchen, cleaning, drivers, and security, she continued. Not only household managers. Agreed, Matteo said. No questions about why someone needs one personal day. For longer leave, coverage may require notice. Then write that. Do not leave it to mood. He leaned one hand on the table. Anything else? Nora looked at Lucia. Mrs. Carbone chooses who attends medical appointments and private outings. The family receives information only with her permission. Agreed. And Carmine does not organize another event until he learns how consent works. Lucia smiled. 6 months. 3, Matteo said. 5, Nora countered. Matteo looked at her. 4. Done. Salvatore stared between them. You are negotiating family discipline with an employee. No, Matteo said. I am negotiating operations with the operations director. Nora placed the draft on the table. Trial period. 30 days. 90. 60. Agreed. Their eyes held over the document. The exchange had been professional, but heat moved beneath every word. Lucia cleared her throat. Now that the government has been formed, I would like tea. Nora turned by instinct, but Matteo reached the tea service first. He poured a cup, added 1 slice of lemon, and carried it to his mother. Lucia accepted it with both hands. You remembered. I remembered because Nora wrote it in the kitchen schedule. A beginning is still a beginning. Later, after the supervisors left and Lucia went upstairs, Nora found Matteo alone in the courtyard. Night had settled over Bell Street. The rain had stopped, leaving the paving stones black and bright beneath the lamps. Bell and Santos stood beyond the gate, far enough away to grant privacy without pretending Matteo ever walked unguarded. Nora had changed back into her gray work dress, although the apron remained folded over her arm. You do not need that tonight, Matteo said. I am still employed. As operations director. On trial. You negotiate like a hostage attorney. You employ people who have needed one. His expression did not change, but she saw the amusement in his eyes. Did you mean the offer? She asked. Every word. Including separate housing protection? Especially that. Why? Matteo looked toward the gate. Because a woman cannot choose freely if her home disappears with one disagreement. Nora's grip loosened on the apron. You learned quickly. I had an unforgiving teacher. Your mother? Her too. He stepped closer, stopping before the space became pressure. You said not at the parish. Her pulse quickened. I did. Is this place different? You are still my employer. That is a problem. A large one. He nodded, accepting the boundary rather than arguing around it. Then I will ask something else. Tomorrow is yours, because today did not count as leave. I was away from the house. You organized 300 meals, protected my mother from a camera, and rewrote my employment policy. That is not a day off. It was still the day I requested. Then consider tomorrow an apology for making you spend it proving the request mattered. Nora studied him, then gave one careful nod. Paid? Entirely. Now you may ask something else. When that day is complete, will you have dinner with me? A business dinner? No. A reward for the promotion? No. An order? Never. The words settled between them. Nora studied the man who had begun the previous morning with a refusal. He had not become gentle in 24 hours. He remained dangerous, disciplined, and capable of making Bell Street obey. Yet when she drew a boundary, he did not test whether his power could move it. Ask me again after my day off, she said. Why? Because then I will know you can let a day belong to somebody else. Matteo considered that. What will you do? Sleep until 8. Call my brother. Take my grandmother's spoon out of the drawer and cook something badly. You cook badly? I manage kitchens. I never claim to improve them. Where will you go? That sounds like monitoring. You are right. He placed both hands in his coat pockets, visibly resisting the questions that usually came with command. Enjoy your day, Nora. I intend to. She walked toward the carriage house without looking back until she reached the door. Mateo was still in the courtyard, letting her leave. Chapter 9. Nora's day off began with no alarm, no uniform, and no knock from the main house. At 8:12, she woke because sunlight crossed her pillow. For several seconds, she lay still and listened for a summons that did not come. There was only the radiator ticking and a delivery truck reversing on the street. Mateo had kept his word. She called her brother, who spent 10 minutes complaining about welding exams before asking whether the mafia boss had really peeled potatoes. Nora refused to answer, which confirmed everything. At noon, she cooked vegetable soup with her grandmother's wooden spoon. It was too salty. She ate 2 bowls anyway. At 3, a plain envelope slid beneath her apartment door. Nora stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was the approved leave form, signed by Mateo, Vincent, and the household supervisor. Beneath it lay a smaller card. No driver. No schedule. No obligation. Dinner, if you choose. 7 o'clock at Rosa's diner. Mateo. There was no black card, no expensive gift, and no instruction disguised as generosity. Nora smiled despite herself. At 7, Rosa's diner glowed beneath a red neon sign 3 blocks from St. Agnes. It was the kind of place where the coffee arrived before the menu and every booth carried scratches from 20 years of elbows. Mateo waited outside. He wore a black wool coat over a charcoal shirt, and 2 bodyguards remained across the street beside the SUV. He looked unmistakably powerful, but he had chosen a place where Nora would not need to learn which fork belonged to which course. "You came," he said. "I chose. I noticed." He opened the diner door, then let her enter first without guiding her by the back. Rosa herself seated them in a corner booth. She greeted Mateo with wary respect and Nora with open curiosity. "Coffee?" Rosa asked. "For me," Nora said. Mateo looked at the cup already being filled. "She knows what you want. I have been coming here since I was 16. Why did I not know that?" "Because background checks do not include pie preferences." "Apple? Coconut cream. That is unexpected. You have known me as a person for approximately 36 hours. 37. Nora laughed. "You counted." "I count everything." "We should discuss that." Over meatloaf and fried onions, they spoke without a schedule. Mateo asked about her brother's welding program, and Nora asked what he had wanted before responsibility became his only language. "I wanted to restore old houses," he said. She set down her fork. "You?" "My father owned 3 buildings before he owned influence. He taught me to repair plaster." "Do your men know?" "Bell does. He has threatened to tell no one." "Why did you stop?" "There was always something more urgent." "Urgency is greedy. So is responsibility. Responsibility should feed people. If it only consumes you, it is fear wearing a respectable coat." Mateo leaned back, studying her. "Do you prepare these sentences?" "My grandmother was exhausting. I owe her a debt. She would charge interest." The waitress cleared their plates. Mateo did not reach for his phone once, although it vibrated twice inside his coat. "You can answer," Nora said. "Bell will interrupt if it matters." "That is delegation." "Do I receive a grade?" "A cautious B." "Cruel." "You arrived with 2 armed men across the street. They are not armed for dinner." "That sentence is doing dangerous work." He smiled fully then, and the transformation caught her off guard. Without the restraint around his mouth, he looked younger and far more dangerous to her peace. Rosa brought coconut cream pie with 2 forks. "I did not order this," Nora said. "He did yesterday," Rosa replied. Nora looked at Mateo. "I asked Bell," he admitted. "That sounds like monitoring." "It was dessert research. A narrow exception. I will record it." They shared the pie. Outside, the night had turned cold. Mateo walked with Nora toward the corner while the SUV followed at a respectful distance. At the entrance to the carriage lane, he stopped. "May I kiss you?" Nora had expected confidence, perhaps even inevitability. The question moved through her more deeply than either. "You ask that very formally. I am trying not to fail the grade. This is not an exam. It feels more serious." She stepped closer. "Yes." Mateo lifted one hand and waited until she leaned into it. His palm settled against her cheek, warm and careful. Then he kissed her. There was nothing uncertain about his desire, but there was restraint in the way he held it. Nora touched the open collar of his coat and kissed him back, choosing the pressure, the nearness, and the man beneath the authority. When they parted, his forehead rested against hers. "You are still my employer," she whispered. "Tomorrow, Vincent will move household operations into an independent contract. You will report through the family office, with an outside employment attorney reviewing it. Nora blinked. You planned that before dinner. I started planning after the courtyard. You could have mentioned it. You told me to let the day belong to you. Her throat tightened. That earns an A, she said. Only an A? Do not become ambitious. He kissed her again, and this time she smiled against his mouth. Chapter 10. For weeks later, the Carbone Foundation held Enzo's memorial luncheon at St. Agnes. There were no staged photographs, reserved family thrones, or speeches written by men who had forgotten the date. The foundation paid for the food, the parish chose the menu, and every guest who wanted to volunteer received an apron. Lucia stood at the soup pot in her blue coat. Her repaired rosary rested around her neck, with the darker silver link nearly invisible beside the cross. She turned at once when Salvatore arrived, but this time the movement looked more amused than angry. He had learned to ask before arranging chairs. Carmine remained under a 4-month event restriction and worked at the dish station without complaint. The grocery store owner inspected his stacks. Nora directed the room in a forest green dress, without an apron. Her new title appeared on the staff plan, but she had refused a name badge because everyone who needed her already knew where to look. Her independent contract had passed review. The leave policy applied to kitchen staff, drivers, cleaners, and security. Belle had been the first bodyguard to request a Friday off, and Matteo had approved it without asking where he was going. That had required visible effort. Matteo entered from the side door in a black 3-piece suit and long overcoat. Santos followed him, while Belle remained somewhere private on his approved day. Conversation shifted when Matteo crossed the room. It always would. He was still the mafia boss whose decisions shaped Bell Street, and listening had not made him harmless. It had made him harder to manipulate, and Nora met him near the service counter. You are late, she said. 2 minutes. The potatoes did not wait. You have volunteers. None with your destructive technique. He leaned closer. You said that was improving. I protect morale. His gaze warmed. They had shared 6 dinners, 3 walks, and 1 Sunday morning repairing a cracked cabinet in Nora's apartment. Matteo had brought his own tools. He had also brought Belle, who spent 2 hours pretending not to hear them argue about hinge alignment. Their relationship had not become easy, because neither of them was easy. Matteo still tried to solve problems before Nora finished describing them, while Nora sometimes treated accepting help as a defeat. They had learned to stop, ask, and begin again. Mama wants us, Matteo said. Lucia waited at a small table near the kitchen. A white box rested before her. Sit, she ordered. Matteo and Nora obeyed. Lucia opened the box. Inside lay 1 old silver bead threaded onto a simple chain. Nora recognized it immediately. That is the bead we replaced. It is, Lucia said. The jeweler drilled it for me. I thought you wanted to keep every original part. I do. I am giving this one a different place. She lifted the chain and held it toward Nora. Nora did not take it at once. Mrs. Carbone. Lucia. Lucia, the rosary belongs to your family. So does the lesson. Matteo watched his mother fasten the chain around Nora's neck. The small bead settled above her collarbone, plain and darkened by years of touch. It does not make you responsible for me, Lucia said. It reminds you that you were brave enough to ask. Nora covered the bead with her fingers. Thank you. Lucia looked at Matteo. And it reminds my son that a woman beside him is not a woman beneath him. I remember, he said. Salvatore approached the table with 3 printed programs. Lucia, Father Daniel says you may speak whenever you are ready. He asked her directly, and she noticed. After the next bowls are served, she said. Of course. When he left, Lucia gave Nora a small nod. Change, like metal, needed pressure in the right place. The room filled with the smell of pepper and warm bread. Matteo stood, then held out his hand to Nora. Come with me. She raised 1 eyebrow. He corrected himself. Will you come with me? Where? The serving line. Are you asking me to work during the luncheon? I am asking you to stand beside me while I embarrass myself with potatoes. Nora placed her hand in his. That sounds recreational. They moved behind the counter together. For the next hour, Matteo served bread while Nora managed the line. He did not interrupt when she redirected volunteers, and she did not refuse when he carried the heaviest pot. Their work fit because neither needed to become smaller. Near the end of the service, a local reporter approached with a notebook. Mr. Carbone, may I ask what changed the memorial? Matteo looked at Nora. The old version of him would have answered for the family. The newer one understood that the story had begun with somebody else's voice. Ask Miss Quinn, he said. The reporter turned to her. What changed? Nora touched the old silver bead at her throat. A woman asked for one day, she said. The rest of us finally listened. The reporter wrote it down, and Matteo did not correct a word. After the hall emptied, they walked outside beneath a clear evening sky. The black SUV waited at the curb, and the last light caught the wet bricks of Bell Street. Nora slipped her hand into Matteo's. Do you know what tomorrow is? She asked. Wednesday. Your first scheduled day off. He stopped walking. That was not approved. The operations director approved it. An abuse of authority. Appeal in writing. What am I supposed to do? Nothing until 9. After that, I need help cooking soup. You admitted you cook badly. Which is why your attendance matters. Matteo looked at the woman who had placed his mother's rosary on his table and forced an entire house to hear the truth inside a simple request. Will Belle be there? Belle is off. Santos. Also off. You have dismantled my security. They will be outside. I am not reckless. Good. He drew her closer, but he waited until Nora rose onto her toes and kissed him first. The most feared man on Bell Street had once believed devotion meant never leaving his post. Nora taught him that love was not measured by the number of hours a person remained in the room. It was measured by whether he made room for another voice, whether he respected a closed door, and whether his strength could protect a choice he had not made. The next morning, Matteo Carbone took his first day off in 14 years. He arrived at Nora's apartment at 9 exactly, carrying onions, bread, and no schedule. Her grandmother's wooden spoon waited on the counter while Lucia's repaired rosary rested over her heart. And when Nora told him the soup needed more pepper, he listened.